You ever get the sense you're walking into something wrong, but you can't quite place it yet? Like your body knows before your heart catches up? That was me that morning. I'd been up since 5 a.m., couldn't sleep a wink the night before. Not from nerves, at least, not the kind I used to get before first dates or job interviews. No, this was a different flavor. A kind of buzzing under the skin. I chalked it up to excitement. My only son, my Daniel, was getting married. I spent 3 hours getting ready. Had my dress laid out the night before, dusty mauve chiffon, delicate lace sleeves, and the same brooch I wore to my sister's wedding back in '89. A little piece of family. I even had my nails done soft pink with a subtle shimmer, and June, my neighbor, fixed my hair into the kind of updo I hadn't worn since Daniel's high school graduation. I looked good. Not just for a mother of the groom, just good. I even took a photo in the mirror before I left, thinking he's going to see me today and remember who helped him become the man he is. I arrived at the venue early like I was told. The whole place looked like something out of a Southern bridal magazine. White columns, soft garden lights, the works. I spotted Emily's family right away. All smiles, all satin. Her mother in something that looked custom-made, dripping in pearls. Her father shaking hands like a senator at a campaign stop. I didn't see Daniel at first. Instead, I was greeted by a young man in a headset. Lucas, the coordinator, I think he said. "Oh, you must be the groom's mother," he said, like it had just dawned on him I had a place there. "Right this way." And that's when the walk began. Down a hallway I hadn't noticed in the rehearsal. Past the coat racks and the storage closets, until we turned a corner that led to the kitchen. You know the kind. Heat radiating off the double doors, smell of garlic and overdone chicken in the air. My heels stuck slightly to the linoleum. That's where I saw it. A single folding chair next to a stack of serving trays. A napkin, just a regular dinner napkin, draped over the seat like that made it special. "Bride's request," Lucas said, eyes darting everywhere but mine. Visual consistency for the photos. I just stared. I wanted to laugh, or maybe scream, or both. Instead, I blinked and nodded like I understood. Like it made perfect sense to hide the woman who paid for the floral arch, the caterers, the tent rental, and the dang violinist she insisted on for cocktail hour. And I did pay for it. Every last check. You see, when Daniel told me he and Emily were getting married, he said, "Mom, don't worry, we're keeping it small." Then 2 weeks later, I get an Excel spreadsheet emailed to me from Emily's wedding planner, complete with price tags for everything from organic herb centerpieces to a gluten-free dessert bar. He called me afterward, all sheepish, asking if I could help just a little. He didn't know I had cashed out part of my retirement fund, sold some jewelry, even took on extra shifts at the library. Whatever my boy needs, I told myself. Whatever makes his day perfect. But as I sat there behind the kitchen doors, I realized something that cut sharper than any betrayal I'd known. I wasn't part of the day at all. I was the bank account, the afterthought. From where I sat, I could hear everything. The clinking of glasses, the laughter, the band striking up at last for the first dance. I couldn't see them, only flashes of people as the doors swung open and shut, servers bustling in and out like I was part of the furniture. I looked down at the little handbag I'd brought. Beige leather, worn at the edges. Daniel bought it for me the Mother's Day after his first real job. Inside it was a packet of tissues, my reading glasses, and a letter I wrote but never gave him. A letter about how proud I was, how much I believed in him. I tore it in half. Quietly, a waiter, barely older than Daniel when he graduated, came by with a plate. Cold chicken, steamed vegetables, a roll harder than my jaw at that moment. He set it down like he was feeding a stray cat. I didn't eat. I didn't cry either. Not yet. But I did pull out my phone. 3 calls. That's all it took. First to the brunch venue. Canceled. Then to the band. They were expecting a second payment for another hour. Not anymore. Finally, the honeymoon suite. A premium room in St. Lucia with an ocean view and champagne upon arrival. Emily had picked it herself. I had paid for it. Actually, I told concierge, let's just remove the reservation entirely. Thank you kindly. No yelling. No drama. Just a quiet click at the end of each call. I left before the sparklers send off, took a cab back to my hotel, and lay on the stiff bed still in my dress. I stared at the ceiling for hours until the sun peeked through the curtains. And you know what? I didn't feel regret. I felt clarity. That kitchen seat, that was the last time I would ever let myself be tucked behind a door in someone else's life. The sun the next morning had the nerve to shine like it hadn't witnessed what I went through the night before. I sat in that stiff hotel armchair, still wearing my dress from the wedding, cradling a cup of coffee that had long gone cold. My shoes were kicked off by the door. My hairpins, those little pearl-tipped ones I'd bought special for the occasion, lay scattered on the nightstand like shrapnel from a battle I hadn't planned to fight. My phone buzzed. It wasn't Daniel. It wasn't anyone. Just a notification from the airline confirming the cancellation of the honeymoon flight. Refund pending, it said. Funny how money comes back faster than people. For hours, I sat there, sipping stale coffee and wondering, not regretting, mind you, just wondering. Would he call? Would she? What would they say? That I embarrassed them? That I overreacted? That I made it about me? As they always say when a woman decides she won't be wallpaper anymore. But the phone stayed silent. By noon, I checked out and caught a cab to the bus station. I couldn't stomach the idea of flying. Too fast. Too clean. I wanted the slow drag of a greyhound through small towns and bad gas station coffee. I needed to feel the road under me. Every bump and curve, like it was scrubbing the pain off me mile by mile. That night, somewhere in the middle of Georgia, I found a tiny motel off the highway. Faded floral bedspread, buzzing neon sign outside the window. I curled up fully clothed and stared at the popcorn ceiling. My thoughts raced, but my heart had gone quiet, like it was waiting. The next day, I did something I hadn't done in years. I opened a notebook. It was the kind I used to buy in packs when Daniel was in school. College ruled, spiral bound, navy blue cover. I dug it out of my tote, grabbed a pen, and started writing. Not letters, not poetry. No, I wrote down what I'd done for him. Every job I worked, every shift I took when he was sick, and I couldn't afford a babysitter. Every night I walked home in the rain because the car needed repairs and I chose his braces over tires. I wrote it all, every small, invisible act, because I needed to see it. Needed to remind myself I wasn't crazy, that my love hadn't been some disposable thing. By the 5th page, I was crying. Not pretty tears either. Ugly ones. The kind where your shoulders shake and your breath catches like your body forgot how to do it on its own. But even in that grief, I knew something had changed. There was no going back. That week passed in quiet rituals. Writing, walking, eating greasy breakfast at diners where the waitresses called you Han and always refilled your coffee before you asked. And then one morning, 5 days later, my phone rang. Daniel. I stared at the screen for a good minute. His name, plain and familiar. No emoji, no nickname, just Daniel. I'd programmed it that way years ago, thinking one day he'd be a senator or a doctor or something else official. I answered, Mom. His voice was quiet, like he wasn't sure if I'd pick up or scream at him. I'm here, I said. A pause. Then, where are you? Somewhere between letting go and moving on, I replied, cool as a mountain breeze. He sighed. Why did you do it? I almost laughed. Why? As if it wasn't obvious. I did it because I finally saw the truth, Daniel. You and Emily made that wedding picture perfect. And in your perfect picture, I wasn't invited. I didn't know, he said, voice softening. Emily, she said it would be less stressful for the photographers if... Less stressful. I cut in. I paid for that wedding. Do you know what it feels like to be hidden behind a kitchen door at your own son's wedding? To hear strangers toast your sacrifices like they were someone else's stories. He didn't respond. I canceled the honeymoon, I said. And I'd do it again. Not because I wanted revenge, but because I wanted you to feel for 1 second what it feels like to be forgotten. Still silence. I'm not just a mother. I'm a woman. And I've earned better than being erased. He exhaled. Can we talk? In person. We're talking now. No, I mean come back. Please. It was my turn to pause. I thought about the empty bus seat beside me, the little diner waitress who'd given me a slice of pie on the house, the notebook still waiting in my bag. Not yet, I said. I've got more living to do. And with that, I ended the call. My hands were steady, my heart calm, because for the first time in a long time, I didn't need an invitation to my own life. The second I hung up that call with Daniel, I felt nothing. Not sadness, not pride, just space. And space, it turns out, is sacred when you've been squashed small for so long. I spent a few more days at the motel, mostly walking and thinking. It was off-season, quiet, a little rundown. The kind of place that had plastic flowers in the lobby and vending machines that still took coins. But the quiet was a blessing. Nobody asked me for anything. Nobody reminded me of what I used to be. I was just Lorraine, room 207. On the fifth morning, I took my coffee out to the concrete slab they called a patio, and that's where I met Sherry. She was maybe 10 years younger than me, dressed in a hot pink tank top and fuzzy slippers, smoking a menthol like it was breakfast. You from around here? She asked. Nope. Passing through. She nodded like that meant something deep. Same. We got to talking, and turns out Sherry had her own story, something about a no-good man, a foreclosure, and a daughter who stopped calling once the inheritance ran dry. There was pain in her eyes, sure, but there was something else too. Fire. The kind I hadn't seen in my own face in years. That same day, I bought a notebook just for stories. Not memories, not this time, but ideas. Sketches of what my life could be. I wrote B&B at the top of one page and underlined it 3 times. I'd always loved the idea of running one. A little house with fresh-baked muffins in the morning, books on the shelves, and quilts folded at the foot of every bed. The next morning, I went online at the library and looked at listings. Just for fun, I told myself. Just curiosity. But then I saw it. A weathered old Victorian home just outside Asheville. Cheap. Needed work. But it had a wraparound porch and a clawfoot tub, and my heart did something strange. It leapt. 2 weeks later, I was standing in front of it with a real estate agent named Melody who talked too fast and wore too much perfume, and I didn't care. I was in love. This place has character, I said, running my fingers over the chipped railing. It has termites, Melody replied. Termites can be treated, I smiled. Character can't be bought. I bought it with what was left of the wedding fund, plus a little from a savings account I hadn't touched since Daniel was in high school. The one I used to think would be for his first house, or his children's education. I'd been saving for a life I wasn't invited to. So I cashed in. On me. I called Daniel that night. Told him I wasn't coming back. That I was starting something new. He didn't yell. He didn't beg. He just went quiet. Then he said something that stuck with me. Emily says you're being selfish. I laughed. Actually laughed. A real one, sharpened from the gut. Tell Emily, I said, that the next time she needs a wedding catered, she can call her mother. I'll be too busy living. I didn't wait for a reply. Just clicked the call off and tossed my phone on the bed like it was a dead weight. The next morning, I started cleaning, room by room, with nothing but elbow grease and determination. My hands blistered. My back ached. But with every window I scrubbed, I felt lighter, freer. Neighbors started stopping by, curious about the new woman in the old Whitmore house. I made sweet tea and served it on the porch. Before long, they were bringing over tools, fresh eggs, gossip, and friendship. 3 weeks in, I caught a glimpse of myself in the bathroom mirror. Hair tied up, sleeves rolled, a streak of pain across my cheek. And I saw her again, that woman I thought I'd lost. The one who used to dream. And I said aloud to my reflection, well, look at you. You're still here. That night, I climbed into bed under a pile of fresh-washed quilts, the scent of lavender in the air, and I smiled. Daniel and Emily were off somewhere dealing with refunds and rescheduling. And me, I was planning my grand opening. And baby, it was going to be beautiful. I was polishing a mirror in the front hall, one of those old brass trim things you can't find anymore, when my phone rang. Blocked number. Now, I'm not usually one to answer mystery calls. But that morning, something told me to pick up. Lorraine Garner, a clipped voice asked. This is she. This is Diane Whitaker, Emily's mother. I nearly dropped the rag in my hand, not because I was surprised to hear from her, but because of the way she said it. Like I should have recognized her instantly. Like she was someone important. Yes, I said carefully. I know who you are. Wonderful, she replied, though her tone suggested it was anything but. I think we should talk. Now let me say this. I had only met Diane twice before the wedding. Once at the engagement party where she introduced herself like a debutante at a charity gala, and once at a cake tasting where she spent the entire time critiquing fondant and pretending not to notice I was paying the bill. We agreed to meet at a tea room halfway between us. I wore a clean blue blouse, pressed jeans, and flats I could walk in. She showed up in linen trousers and Chanel sunglasses, even though we were seated inside. She didn't waste time. You embarrass my daughter, she said, folding her manicured hands around a porcelain teacup. She embarrassed me first, I replied, stirring honey into my cup like I hadn't just flipped the table with 5 words. She blinked, clearly not used to being talked back to. You could have spoken to us. We could have handled things differently. Funny, I said, because when I showed up to the wedding, I wasn't handled at all. I was tucked away in a corner like an unpaid intern. She wanted a certain aesthetic, and I wanted to be treated like a human being. Seems neither of us got what we wanted. Diane pursed her lips. Daniel's been very upset. I raised my eyebrows. Then perhaps Daniel should have spoken up when his wife and her mother were turning his wedding into a performance piece. She didn't respond. Instead, she sat back in her chair and crossed her legs like we were negotiating a merger. You made your point. You've cost them quite a bit of money. I covered plenty. Maybe they'll learn to be more careful with someone else's generosity. Diane paused, her expression softening just a fraction. Do you regret it? I took a long sip of tea. Let the quiet stretch. No, I said finally. I regret staying silent for so long. But that night, that was the first honest thing I'd done in years. We didn't finish our tea. As I stepped outside, the sunlight caught in my hair and I thought, let her spin whatever story she wants. Because the truth had already been set free, and it wasn't going back into the closet with the coat racks and the dirty trays. Later that evening, Daniel called again. Why are you talking to Emily's mother? He asked, more wounded than angry. She called me, I said. She said you were different. I am. He paused. Are you coming to the family dinner this weekend? Emily's parents want to smooth things over. Smooth over what? I asked. The part where I disappeared from my own son's life, or the part where no one noticed I was gone? He was quiet. Then, finally, I miss you. I swallowed. That one got me. I miss who you used to be, he added. And just like that, the sweetness turned to ash. Well, I said softly, she's not coming back. I didn't cry after that call. I didn't rage either. I went out to the porch with a glass of iced tea, watched the sun set behind the hills, and listened to the crickets rise up like a choir. This was mine now. Not Daniel's version of me. Not Emily's accessory. Me. There's something about small towns. You can sneeze, and by dinner time, folks are arguing over whether it was allergies or a breakdown. So it was no surprise when I walked into Dottie's diner one Tuesday morning and felt every head turn my way. Just a second too long, just a shade too curious. I nodded politely, slid into my usual booth by the window, and ordered the cinnamon French toast and a black coffee. Dottie herself, who hadn't spoken more than 4 words to me in 5 years, came over to pour my refill with a smirk like she already knew the headline. Saw Daniel's wedding pictures in the Gazette, she said casually. Odd there wasn't a single one with you in it. I met her eyes. Well, not everyone wants the photographer to capture reality. She laughed. Loudly. Too loudly. A few other booths chuckled along, like I'd told the punchline to a joke they'd been waiting for. That's when I knew the story was out. Not the full one, of course, not the late-night phone calls or the chicken gone cold behind a kitchen door, but enough. Enough for people to whisper, did you hear what happened to Lorraine? And more importantly, did you hear what Lorraine did? At first, I hated it. I hated the looks, the way folks would ask, how are you doing? With those tilted heads and lips pulled tight with sympathy they hadn't earned. But after a while, I stopped shrinking from it. Because they weren't just gossiping. They were noticing. One afternoon, while I was picking up paint samples at the hardware store, a woman I didn't know from Eve stopped me near the checkout. "You the one who bought the Whitmore place?" she asked. "I am. Heard about the wedding thing." I braced for judgment, but she just nodded. "Good for you," and walked away. The next day, it was my neighbor Paul who stopped by with a box of tile samples and a slice of pecan pie from his wife. "Heard you're fixing the place up," he said. "I do cabinetry. If you ever need help." People were watching, sure, but some of them were rooting for me too. Funny how a woman standing up for herself after years of shrinking, bending, making do, can look like rebellion, or maybe even revolution. Meanwhile, the silence from Daniel stretched on, until I got a card in the mail. No return address, but I knew that handwriting like the back of my hand. "Sorry," it said in small block letters, "for how we treated you. Emily doesn't understand, but I think I'm starting to. I hope you're okay. No love, Daniel." No phone number. Just that. I stared at it for a long time, then folded it carefully and placed it in my nightstand drawer. I wasn't ready to forgive him, but I wasn't ready to toss it either. That night, I dreamed I was back at the wedding. Same dress, same hair, same seat behind the kitchen door. But when the music started, I didn't sit down. I walked through those double doors, past the trays and the staff, onto the dance floor. I took the mic, and I spoke. I didn't wake up crying. I woke up inspired. The next morning, I called the local paper and asked how much it cost to run a full-page ad. They told me. I said that'll do. Then I drafted the headline in my notebook. "The view from the kitchen chair. A mother's side of the story." I hadn't written anything for the public since the PDA newsletter back in 2002. But something about putting my truth out there in black and white felt necessary. Not for revenge. Not even for closure. For clarity. I titled it "The View from the Kitchen Chair." And I wrote it like a letter. Not just to Daniel or Emily, but to every woman who's ever footed the bill and still been handed the broom. I told it all. The dress I picked. The seat I was given. The tray of cold chicken. And the napkin on my lap. I described the program that left out my name. The chandelier I glimpsed only through the swinging door. The call I made that shut the whole thing down. I ended it with this. I paid for the day, but I also paid for every day before that. With love, with labor, with years. So when I was treated like a ghost, I chose not to disappear. I chose to act. And I'll never apologize for remembering who I am. The paper ran it the following Sunday. A full page. Center spread. I didn't even tell anyone it was coming out. I just went down to the corner store at 7 a.m., bought a copy, and sat on the bench out front, sipping coffee and flipping to the page like it was a secret I'd kept long enough. By noon, my phone was lighting up like fireworks on the 4th of July. Some messages were what you'd expect. I had no idea, Lorraine. "You've always been so classy. I can't believe they treated you like that." But others? They came from people I hadn't heard from in years. Old coworkers. My sister's best friend. A woman I barely remembered from church. One said, "Thank you for writing what I never could." Another simply read, "I see you now." Even Sherry from the motel texted, "That piece? Gutsy as hell. Want to grab lunch?" But the call that caught me off guard came just after dinner. "Hi, Mom." Daniel. His voice was low. Hoarse, even. I read it. I didn't speak. "You told the truth," he said. "You really told it." "Yes," I said simply. There was a long pause. Then I showed it to Emily. Now that made me blink. She was furious at first, he admitted. Said you embarrassed her. But then she just sat down. Quiet. I waited. She asked me, did I really treat her like that? And I didn't know what to say. Because I did too, didn't I? I exhaled, slow, careful. "I can't answer that for you, Daniel. You already know the answer. I'm sorry." There it was. 2 words I'd stopped hoping for. Not because they weren't deserved, but because I never thought he'd mean them. "I know you are," I said. "But it doesn't erase it." "I don't want to erase it," he said. "I want to understand it." That surprised me. Then he asked, "Can I come visit?" The words floated there like something fragile, like a truce made of paper cranes. I told him he could. Not because I wanted things to go back to how they were, but because I wanted him to see the woman I'd become when I stopped waiting for permission to matter. That weekend, he showed up. Alone. No Emily. No flowers. Just a six-pack of lemonade. And a slightly crooked smile that reminded me of when he was 10 and had chipped his tooth falling off his bike. He didn't say much at first. Just walked through the house, commenting on the paint colors, the porch swing, the pie cooling on the counter. Then he stood in the kitchen, the same kitchen I'd imagined 100 times since the wedding, and said, "You really did it, didn't you?" I looked around at the space I'd scrubbed and painted and claimed with my own hands. I did. He nodded. "You're different." "No, Daniel," I said gently. "I'm just me, finally." Daniel stayed 2 nights. We didn't make a big production of it. He slept in the guest room on fresh sheets I'd hung on the line that morning. We shared coffee in silence the first morning. By the second, he made it himself, badly, but he tried. He walked with me through the backyard, asked about the hydrangeas. I told him I planted them because they bloom like they've got nothing to prove. He nodded like he understood. It wasn't until Saturday evening, after a long, slow dinner of meatloaf and mashed potatoes, that we really talked. We sat on the front porch, watching the sky turn that watercolor pink, when he finally asked the question I knew had been chewing on him since he pulled into the driveway. "Why didn't you just talk to me before the wedding? About how you felt?" I took a long sip of my tea before answering. "Because, Daniel, I did. 1,000 different ways. I just stopped using words when I realized no one was listening." He didn't argue, just nodded, slow and heavy. "I thought I was doing the right thing," he said. "Keeping the peace, making Emily happy. And what about making me feel like I belonged?" I asked, not cruel, just tired. "I thought you'd understand." "That's the trouble with people like me, baby," I said softly. "We always understand. We always forgive. Until we don't." He put his head in his hands, elbows on knees, and for a moment he looked so much like the boy I used to rock through fevers and growing pains, it nearly undid me. "I didn't know," he whispered. "You didn't want to know," I corrected gently. "There's a difference." The sun dipped behind the hills. Crickets chirped. A breeze tugged at the hem of my sleeve. He sat up. "I don't know how to fix this." I smiled. "Maybe it's not about fixing. Maybe it's about rebuilding something better." He looked at me then, really looked. And I saw it in his eyes. Regret, yes, but also something else. Respect. The kind I hadn't seen in years. The next day, he helped me move some furniture around in what would be the reading room. We didn't talk about the wedding, or Emily, or that lonely folding chair behind the kitchen doors. But when he left, he hugged me tight, longer than I expected. And when he pulled back, he said, "I don't want to lose you." "You already did," I said, not unkindly. "But you can still get to know the woman I became." He nodded. And for the first time since that wedding, I felt something uncoil in my chest. Hope. Not for things to go back, but for something new to grow. It was a Tuesday morning when I saw the silver Lexus pull into my driveway. I was on the porch, clipping coupons and sipping sweet tea, when the door opened and out stepped a woman I hadn't seen since the day she grinned at me from the front row of my son's wedding like I was an unpaid seat filler. Diane Whitaker, Emily's mother. I sat there, heart calm, face unreadable. She walked up the porch steps like she owned the county. "I hope this isn't a bad time," she said. "It's not," I said, "but I have a strict no manipulation before noon policy." She blinked. Then she smiled. I gestured to the rocking chair beside me. "Have a seat, Diane. I don't bite, unless provoked." She sat, smoothed her slacks like it was a job interview. "I came to talk," she said. "You're talking," I replied. A long silence followed. Birds chirped in the tree nearby. My wind chimes danced in the breeze. She took off her sunglasses and looked out across the field. "I didn't know," she said finally. "Didn't know what?" I asked. "That they sat you behind the kitchen. That you weren't included." I didn't respond. "I thought you'd asked for it," she said. "Emily said you didn't want to be a bother." I laughed just once. "No, Diane. I never said that. What I said was I'd step back if needed. I didn't say vanish me like a mistake." She looked down at her hands. "I was wrong," she said. "Now that I didn't expect. I raised Emily to be strong," she added, voice soft. But I think I taught her to be unkind without realizing it. She got that from me. We sat in silence a while longer. Then she reached into her bag and pulled out a small, square envelope. "This was returned," she said. "I thought you should have it." It was the wedding photo I'd never received. A formal shot, Daniel and Emily, posed in front of the gazebo. But something else was inside. A second photo. One someone must have taken during the rehearsal when Daniel and I were laughing together, arms linked, before it all unraveled. I held it in my hands, unsure what to feel. "I'm not here to apologize for Emily," Diane said, standing. "She needs to do that herself. But I am sorry for my part." "Thank you," I said. And I meant it. As she walked down the steps, I called after her. "Diane." She turned. "Next time you try to erase a woman like me, make sure I haven't already written the ending." She didn't laugh, but her lips twitched. And then she was gone. I went inside and pinned that rehearsal photo to the fridge, right next to my to-do list and a note from my neighbor's grandson. Not because I wanted to remember the wedding, but because I wanted to remember that version of me. The one still smiling, still showing up, still believing. It was late afternoon, the sun casting that golden light that makes even dust look like magic when I heard the knock. 3 soft taps, followed by silence. I wiped my hands on a dish towel and opened the door. And there she was, Emily's daughter. My granddaughter, Lila. 7 years old, gap-toothed smile, backpack slung over one shoulder. I hadn't seen her since the wedding. She looked up at me like I was made of both clouds and puzzles. "Hi, Grandma," she said. "Can I come in?" I stepped aside, heart thumping. "Does your mama know you're here?" She nodded. She dropped me off. I blinked. "She said you might not want to see us," Lila added, walking in like she'd been doing it her whole life. "But I said I miss your cookies." That was all it took. My knees went weak, but I held it together. I poured her lemonade, pulled out a plate of sugar cookies I'd made the night before, plain and soft, her favorite, and we sat at the kitchen table. She swung her legs beneath the chair, crumbs tumbling onto her lap. "Mom says you're mad," she said between bites. I nodded. "A little. Are you mad at me?" My throat closed up. "No, baby," I whispered. "Never at you." She looked thoughtful, the way only children can be. "Did you really cancel their honeymoon?" she asked, eyes wide. I stifled a laugh. "Where'd you hear that?" "Uncle Paul said you were a legend," she grinned. I shook my head. Sometimes grown-ups forget what matters. Lila shrugged. "I think you should have had a front row seat. You're the grandma." Tears sprang to my eyes, quick and hot. I turned away, pretending to check the stove. She didn't let me. She stood up, walked over, and wrapped her little arms around my waist. "I don't care what Mama says. You're still my favorite." And that cracked something wide open in me. We spent the next 2 hours making a mess in the kitchen, flour everywhere, chocolate chips in places I'm still finding. She drew me a picture, me in a crown, holding a cookie tray. "You're the cookie queen," she declared proudly. That evening, when Emily came to pick her up, she didn't get out of the car. Just waited at the curb while Lila skipped down the steps with sticky fingers and a heart-shaped Tupperware full of leftovers. I watched from the doorway. She didn't wave, but she didn't drive away either. And that was something. I closed the door behind me and turned to the quiet house. And for the first time in a long while, it didn't feel empty. It felt full of laughter, of crumbs, of tiny fingers tugging on forgiveness. Autumn came slow that year. The trees around my house turned one leaf at a time. No big show, no rush, just a quiet surrender. And that's how it felt too, like something inside me was learning to unclench. By then, the kitchen had been repainted, the guest room was rented out to a traveling nurse named Tessa, who baked banana bread on Tuesdays, and I had a new tradition of sitting on the porch every morning with my coffee and a crossword puzzle. I had, as they say, built a life, not a replacement, a resurrection. Then one morning, a cream-colored envelope arrived in the mail. No return address. But I knew that handwriting like I knew the sound of my own breath. Emily. Inside was a letter. Not long, not dramatic. Just this. "I didn't see you. And I should have. I thought I was building something perfect. But I built it on someone else's sacrifice. I don't expect forgiveness, but I'm sorry. Emily. I read it 3 times. Then I tucked it into the same drawer that held Daniel's card, next to Lila's Cookie Queen drawing. I didn't call her. I didn't run to her door. But I forgave her. Quietly. For my own sake, not hers. A few days later, Daniel came to visit again. This time he brought Lila and a folding chair. I raised an eyebrow. He smiled. Thought you might like a say in where you sit. I stared at that chair, simple, sturdy, fresh white paint still faintly fragrant, and something warm spread through me like honey in hot tea. You still don't get it, I said, smiling as I took the chair from him and set it down, not behind a kitchen door, not on the edges, but right in the center of the porch. It's not about where I sit, I said, settling into it. It's about who puts me there. Lila climbed into my lap like she belonged there, because she did. Daniel took the rocking chair beside me, and together, we watched the wind shake loose the last leaves from the trees. No speeches, no music, just peace, earned, not gifted. And I sat in that chair, the one I chose, the one I claimed, and thought to myself, let the world keep its weddings. I've got my life back, and I'm not giving it up again.